Hello, welcome to the channel and welcome to Forza Horizon 4. I'm going to make a tutorial. I've never done this before, so this will be fun. So, I do a lot of drifting in this game. All types. Backwards, forwards, points, tandems. So I thought I would make a video on how to get points. I'm going to clear that up right now. This is a video on how to get points in drift zones. How to build those kind of cars. Not slow 300 horsepower tandem cars. I'm also going to say, because I have watched quite a lot of tuning tutorials just to see what other people are doing and what's working. Forza Horizon tuning is not realistic. I'm going to do some extreme things, and when tuning in Forza Horizon, that is completely normal. If you saw the tuning setups that are on the top cars on the leaderboards, you would know what I mean. You know those OP Ford GTs in S1 cars? They've got locked diffs. Just to, put into perspective how extreme the tuning is in this game. Anyway, we're going to build an all-wheel drive points car. I'm going to use the Firebird because it's fairly new and I love Firebirds. It's a gorgeous car to look at. I'm going to go through absolutely everything. So, first of all, power. You need as much power as possible. In our case, that's going to be the absolutely awful sounding Viper V10. And obviously, all-wheel drive. And then whichever one of these gives the most power, which 99% of the time will be twin turbos. With the exception of the racing V8, then I think it doesn't actually make a difference if you use turbos or superchargers. Now, here is the big thing when it comes to getting points. These are the tyres you're going to use. Yes, I'm not joking. We are using drag tyres. We are not upgrading the width of them. The wheels is perfectly up to you. You can make them lighter, obviously. I usually don't. I also usually leave the rim sizes alone. I do, however, usually do this, just because I like how it looks. Suits these sort of cars. Now, everything else, fully upgraded. With the exception of roll cages. I don't do roll cages. I feel that it doesn't make enough of a difference, and it just adds loads of weight. I'm also going to say, if the car you're using doesn't have drift suspension, always use rally suspension instead. Rally suspension has got more steering angle than race suspension. It's also what I use for reverse drifting. I'm also going to say, with some cars, especially older ones, they might have tyres that are ridiculously thin, obviously. In that case, if you feel like it's sliding too much, upgrade the width. Because drift car's no good if it keeps spinning around in circles. Right, that's the build part done. Pretty good power. We're not too heavy. And of course we're all-wheel drive. That is the base of our tune. And now we get to the actual tuning, the really important bit. Starting with tyre pressure. To start with, I always go absolute minimum on the front and maximum on the rear. If you're sliding too much, spinning out, decrease the rear. Basically, it's as easy as that. I usually don't touch the front once it's at minimum, but if you're having trouble sliding, maybe, if you feel like it's got too much grip at the front, you can, of course, increase that. Gearing. I usually just push it so that the 6th gear is right at the end, and that is usually good for most cars. Obviously, there will probably be occasions where you're going to want to change it. For instance, obviously, 2nd gear is too short, you just increase it like that. Dead easy to do. You will probably need to change it for each drift zone if you're going for points, like the absolute maximum points. And now we get to the real extremes that I was talking about earlier. For camber, front, you want -5. Rear, you want -5. Toe, for the front, you want +5. For the rear, +5. And keep the caster at 7. So, if you're sliding too much and spinning out, decrease that. If your car's really twitchy, if you're on sim steering, decrease that. I would usually only recommend decreasing it in small increments, because it can make a much bigger difference than you would think. Same applies to the toe. If it's sliding too much, just decrease it in small increments. Right, anti-roll bars. Now, I would say this is kind of personal preference when we get to the roll bars and springs. So with the roll bars, I tend to keep them quite soft. I start at 5, front and rear. If the car isn't sliding as much as I want it to, I will increase the rear. If it's sliding too much, decrease the rear. If it's not transitioning fast enough, increase the front. If it's transitioning too fast, decrease the front. That's what I do. Now for springs. So, I always start, depending on the weight of the car, at either 90 or 100. This, as far as Forza goes, this car is on the slightly heavier side. So, I'll keep this one at 100 front and rear. Again, if the car's sliding too much and spinning out, decrease the rear. But that will give it more grip in the rear. If it's not sliding enough, increase the rear. Ride height, I leave it obviously low, slammed. You might want to increase this. I don't know what reason you would have to do it other than personal preference. I've done that before just because I prefer have some cars look lifted. It does make cars a bit more wobbly, and I do think you get slightly less points. So I would recommend keeping it low. Damping. This is the same as anti-roll bars. I go 5 all round. Same as with the anti-roll bars and springs. If it's sliding too much, decrease the rear. If it's not sliding enough, increase it. If it's not transitioning fast enough, increase the rear. If it's transitioning too fast, decrease the rear. I might have got that the wrong way around. You might have to experiment. I'm really tired. Aero. Most cars won't have aero if you're doing drift builds. You've got no need for it. It just tries to straighten you out, which is very, very counterproductive. So, if you do have aero, I just recommend putting it to minimum, or trying to make both of them the same value. So if I were to put front and rear aero on this car, I would put the front to maximum and the rear to minimum, because then they would both be the same value. I don't know if that's what I should be doing, but that's what I do. Braking. This is entirely personal preference. I leave it stock if I'm going for points and stuff. But obviously, if you want it to, I suppose, slide a bit better whilst braking, you decrease the pressure, move the balance about. I'm also going to mention that in Forza Horizon 4, this is back to front. Setting it to the rear actually sets it to the front, and vice versa. I don't know why that's a thing. I assume that happened by accident, and they couldn't change it because that would mess up a lot of tunes. Now, the diff. I go 100, 0, 100, 0, 70. This is the base setup. This changes a lot, especially the centre balance, depending on drift zone and just how the car drives. With some cars, especially depending on where your engine is positioned, having this too far to the rear will just make it spin. If you get too much angle, you don't get any points. And in slower drift zones, you might want to bring this down. Makes it slightly more controllable, a bit easier to manage. But I believe that is the tuning done. Obviously this is a base setup, you would change all of this depending on the drift zone and car. So, I'm going to give our little build here a quick test. I've never used this car, so I genuinely don't know how it's going to do. So the first thing you'll notice with this tune is it tries to pull itself sideways. That's a good thing, you want that. And I'm going to show you what I mean by slidey. This is what drag tyres do to drift cars. Look how much it slides and how easy it is. Absolutely effortless. 168, that is probably higher than most people's PBs. And now that was easy. That was without even trying. I got to 168. As you can see, drag tyres are mental. Slightly broken. If you're in a drift adventure and you notice that somebody is absolutely demolishing you, this is why. It's drag tyres. It's always drag tyres. They are too good. But anyway, I hope that helped some of you. Hopefully. This is my first tutorial. I did try. If there's a... Oh, yes, important. Especially if you're going for points. Almost forgot. Difficulty settings. Simulation. I know a lot of you didn't want to see that. Manual with, I would say clutch is slightly less important, especially for these sort of cars. I'm also, automatic. You may have heard of someone called Ken Blockson. He makes some of the best drift cars in the game. I learnt to tune these off of him. He makes the cars one gear. He just increases first gear. That is really easy to do. Literally just increase the first gear. Practice with it a bit. Find where it's good to drive. And then you can do this in automatic. You're not going to get the most points doing that. But it works if you want to use automatic. Simulation steering for points is pretty much a must. Because it allows you to transition so much faster. And I also believe ABS off most people go for. I haven't used ABS in so long that I honestly couldn't tell you if it makes much of a difference. But obviously I keep everything off. Obviously traction and stability off. Driving line, you probably want to keep on if you're going for points, just for consistency's sake. Consistent, that's a hard word to say. Obviously keep your damage and tyre wear off, unless you want to make it extra hard on yourself. And I'd recommend keeping rewind on if you're going for points. Most of the high scores, those people getting those ridiculous scores, have rewind on and they have practiced for hours. This isn't something that you can do just immediately. And to prove that these sort of tunes work, I am pretty high up on some of these leaderboards. 402nd in the world in a 911 with the exact same tuning that this Firebird has. And I'm pretty high up on all of these leaderboards. Especially the ones where I've actually tried. This one was in a Treno. So yeah, now that will be the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if it helps. If there's anything else you want me to do a tutorial on. I consider myself fairly okay at tuning. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.